Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moment. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Martial Universe Season 7 Part 7 based on novel. So let's start. The golden light that surged around Lindong, who was in the sky, was gradually withdrawn. The sharp pressure also quietly disappeared. After which, he directly descended on a flat platform in front of many pairs of eyes. When Lindong's figure landed, Mo Ling's group, who had been waiting for a long time, immediately came to receive him. Their faces contained some joy. "Brother Lindong, congratulations on successfully enduring the tribulation." Lindong smiled when he heard the congratulations from Mo Ling's group. After which, his eyes swept over the place and was immediately startled. He did not see Little Martin or Little Flame. Where is Little Martin and Little Flame? The Little Martin duo left the Dao sect 3 days ago. They instructed me to hand this to you before they left. Mo Ling shrugged his shoulders. They were aware of just how unfathomable Little Martin was. Therefore, they did not find his unique actions to be strange. Mo Ling also extended his hand while uttering those words. His palm had a flowing golden light within it. Lindong could sense a trace of demonic spiritual aura from Little Martin within the golden light. They have left her. Lindong sighed softly. He curled his mouth and took the golden light from Mo Ling's hand. The golden light was channeled into his body the moment it reached his hand. A blurry figure also appeared within his mind. It was Little Martin. "Lindong, I have taken Little Flame and left first. There is a place in Eastern Xian region which is very beneficial to his training. It is likely that you will be quite safe within Dao sect and I can leave feeling rest assured. Once Little Flame has completed his training, I will bring him back. Additionally, I can also recover some of my strength during this time. In the future, there will be other issues." Little Martin's handsome face turned a little shady when he mentioned this point. His voice also contained a trace of densely cold killing intent. Lindong was quiet. He was aware that there were many unresolved issues from the past. Little Martin was the previous owner of the mysterious stone talisman. However, he ended up being forced by others until such a sorry stage. Had he not met Lindong, it was likely that he would gradually scatter like smoke within the stone talisman. That fate could be considered miserable. "I understand your character. If anything happens to me, you will definitely lend me a hand even if it meant risking death. However, I must still tell you that if you wish to assist me in the future, you must increase your strength. Otherwise, I will resolve those issues by myself. Since I have already acknowledged you as my brother, I do not wish for you to seek death for no reason. By being able to force me at my peak state back then to such an extent, my opponent is not some simple person. I will leave a trace of demonic spirit seal in your body and I will contact you directly if anything happens in the future. If something happens to you, you can directly shatter this demonic spirit seal and I will be able to sense it. Grandpa Martin will stand up for you if you suffer any grievances in Dao sect. It is not the Dao sect place to bully my brother. Additionally, amongst the three of us, even though that foolish tiger Little Flame has always been on your side, you must show some true ability if you want to be the big brother. Otherwise, Grandpa Martin will not agree to it. Therefore, you should train hard during this period of time." Little Martin's illusory body gradually disappeared after this voice slowly sounded. Finally, it transformed into a golden light that concealed itself in Lindong's body. This fellow, the corner of Lindong's mouth was gently lifted a little. Immediately, the fist under his hand was gradually tightened. He faced the sky and inhaled a deep breath. "You can be rest assured. Although you refuse to admit it till the day you die, I will surpass you no matter what in order to get you to willingly acknowledge me as big brother. In the future, we three brothers will definitely make a name for ourselves in this world together." Back then, they had walked out from that small Qingyang town. At that time, one of them was a weak youth, another was a demonic spirit that could disappear anytime. From a certain point of view, the two of them could be considered to have relied on each other until today. This relationship was indeed something that an ordinary person had difficulty understanding. Lindong gradually calmed the ripple within his heart. After all, This was not some life or death separation. With his current strength, Lindong already possessed the ability to protect himself, and there was even less need to worry about the safety of Little Martin and Little Flame. Currently, Little Martin possessed the physical body of a celestial demon Martin, and he would not be at a disadvantage even when faced with a mysterious life stage expert. Hence, his strength was considered top tier in the Eastern Xian region. As long as no unforeseen incidents occurred, it was likely that they would be extremely safe. Currently, the only thing that he needs to be worried about is to successfully comprehend the great desolated scripture. After calming himself down, Lindong raised his head and smiled towards Mo Ling's group. He was just about to speak when he suddenly sensed a pair of eyes containing a pressuring feeling shooting towards him. His brows were lifted immediately. He turned his head before his eyes turned towards the spot where the sight came from. The spot where Lindong looked at, stood a dark red-clothed man. The man's arm hugged his chest and he had an indifferent expression. Although he did not say anything, there was a powerful pressure being scattered over. Lindong saw a somewhat embarrassed-looking Tong Tron behind this man. His eyes flickered, appearing as though he had guessed something. The commotion that you had caused this time around is too big. Even the 4 senior direct disciples of the Desolate Hall headed over after being informed. That person called Jiang Hao is an extremely renowned person. Moreover, he is extremely protective of those close to him. Tong Tron is from the same group as him. You should be careful, Mo Ling softly spoke from beside Lindong. His tone contained some worry. No matter how one put it, Jiang Hao was one of the 4 senior direct disciples, and he was one of the most outstanding Desolate Hall disciples. Lindong nodded slightly. He also clearly understood that the disciples within the Desolate Hall were divided into factions. Clearly, the factions of the 4 senior direct disciples were the strongest. This time around, even though it was justifiable for Lindong to take Tong Tron's spot, it likely caused some people to feel displeased. Competition was something that would not be absent anywhere. With this thought in mind, Lindong looked towards 3 different directions. There were 3 other senior direct disciples there. It was possible for him to sense a pressure that was not inferior to Jiang Hao. Based on his estimates, it was likely that all 4 of them had advanced to the 7 Yuan Nirvana stage. They are indeed the most outstanding disciples in Desolate Hall. A praise flashed across Lindong's heart. Although the Desolate Hall was considered the weakest amongst the 4 halls, a camel on the brink of death was still stronger than a horse. This foundation was still something that one should not underestimate. Of course, these 4 senior direct disciples were indeed no ordinary individuals. However, neither was Lindong some soft specimen. If they were to really fight, Lindong would not feel the least bit afraid of them. Swoosh! The sound of wind being split apart was transmitted from midair. Immediately, Chen Zhen's and Wu Dao's figure appeared on this platform. All the Desolate Hall disciples hurriedly bowed and greeted them when they saw this. Even those 4 senior direct disciples withdrew their haughtiness. Clearly, all the Desolate Hall's disciples greatly respected these 2 hall chiefs. Ha ha, Lindong, well done. Chen Zhen waved his hands towards the many disciples. After which, his eyes looked at Lindong. His old face was covered with smiles. Clearly, he was extremely satisfied with the result that Lindong had achieved during the Pill River head immersion. Hall Chief has overpraised me. I was merely lucky. Lindong hurriedly spoke in a humble manner when he heard this. Chen Zhen smilingly stared at Lindong. The joy within his eyes could not be hidden. He mused for a moment before saying, with your current achievement, you already possess the qualification to be promoted to become a senior direct disciple despite your brief time here. Clamor. Some uproar appeared from the platform when Chen Zhen's voice sounded. Numerous envious eyes looked towards Lindong. Strictly speaking, there were 4 types of disciples within the Desolate Hall: branch disciples, Desolate Hall disciple and the direct disciple. Above the direct disciple is the senior direct disciple. There were tens of thousands of branch disciples in Desolate Hall, 3,000 Desolate Hall disciples and 300 direct disciples. However, there were only 4 senior direct disciples. From this, one could tell just how distinguished this status was. Moreover, the most important thing was that only a senior direct disciple had the right to study the great desolated scripture. Many disciples of the desolate hall had put in an endless amount of hard work in order to become a senior direct disciple. However, in front of their very eyes, Lindong, who had just entered the desolate hall for less than half a month, was actually directly granted an exception and made a senior direct disciple. This caused many people to be so envious that their eyes turned red. Although they were envious, they clearly understood that the ability that Lindong had displayed did entitle him to such an exception. Lindong was similarly startled because of Chen Zhen's words. A joy immediately surged within his heart. In this way, he was one step closer to the great desolated scripture. "Thank you, Hall Chief." Lindong took a step forward. He cupped his hands in thanks. However, his voice had just sounded when a deep cry suddenly sounded from behind him. "Wait!" Swoosh! The eyes of everyone present turned. Finally, they looked towards the back. The red-clothed Jiang Hao was crossing his hands before he looked at Lindong with icy-cold eyes. Meanwhile, a frightening yuan power ripple slowly spread from within his body. On the spacious platform, the atmosphere became much quieter due to his sudden outburst. Quite a few desolate hall disciples stared at each other in dismay. However, they closed their mouths shut and kept quiet. All of them understood Jiang Hao's character. Since Lindong had seized Tong Chuan's spot for the Pill River head immersion, even if this matter did not occur, he would not easily let a new disciple that had spent less than a month in the desolate hall become a senior direct disciple. At the three other directions, the other senior direct disciples Tong Pang, Feng Yun, and Song Ju did not voice out like Jiang Hao did. However, there was a hint of doubt in their eyes. They had all expended great effort to achieve their status as senior direct disciples during the past years. However, as of now, Lindong was still a newbie. Although it had to be said that Lindong achieved a terrifying result, this does not mean that he would immediately receive their approval. Mo Ling and the others frowned and looked at Lindong with concerned expressions. They had an extremely good relationship with him and they were naturally happy to see Lindong's status within the desolate hall rise. However, looking at the current situation where Jiang Hao had voiced his opposition, they all felt quite hopeless. Regardless, Jiang Hao's power, prestige and fame exceeded Lindong's. However, under the gaze of Mo Ling and the others, Lindong remained calm and collected without a trace of anger. His current disposition gained some admiration from Mo Ling and the rest. Ever since their first meeting, the fellow right in front of them could always maintain a calm and collected composure when facing any thorny situation, before settling everything in the end. In mid-air, Chen Zhen and Wu Dao shot a look at Jiang Hao while frowning. However, there was no sense of surprise within their eyes as if they had long expected this to happen. "Jiang Hao, what do you have to say?" said Chen Zhen slowly. Senior Uncle Chen Zhen, a senior direct disciple, is the role model and pride of the disciples in the desolate hall. Not only would one need to have outstanding strength, one would need to gain everyone's trust and respect. Although this junior brother is quite talented, wouldn't it be a bit too quick to promote him to a senior direct disciple right now, said Jiang Hao solemnly as he bowed at Chen Zhen. An ordinary disciple would need to address Chen Zhen and Wu Dao as hall master. However, since Jiang Hao was a senior direct disciple, he could address Chen Zhen as senior uncle. From this, it could be seen that a senior direct disciple's status is quite high. Chen Zhen frowned and replied, "Jiang Hao, there are always exceptions. If we were to follow the rules and rot without any change, the desolate hall would forever remain as the last amongst the four halls." "It's true that there can be exceptions," replied Jiang Hao. Narrowing his eyes and looking towards Lindong, he casually added on, "However, I do not believe this junior brother has obtained the qualification for an exception to be made." The instant this statement was made, quite a few disciples below the platform pulled at their mouths, as it was slightly cruel. A trace of anger swept past Mo Ling and the others after hearing what Jiang Hao said. Unknowingly, they had already regarded Lindong as their unofficial leader. At this moment, Lindong was being ridiculed. Therefore, they naturally felt displeased. However, although they were feeling discontented within their hearts, they did not dare to carelessly chip in with their comments. After all, this was the Dao sect and Jiang Hao's status and strength within the desolate hall were way above them. Therefore, the gazes of Mo Ling and the others once again landed on Lindong, whose expressionless face now had a faint trace of a smile. Under the numerous gazes, he turned his body around and looked straight at Jiang Hao without a single trace of fear in his eyes. After noticing Lindong's vision, Jiang Hao slightly curled his lip and crossed his hands in front of his chest. An imposing aura rushed out of him and started to oppress the former. Possessing the cultivation level of 7 Yuan Nirvana stage was sufficient for him to look down on Lindong. "Senior brother Jiang Hao, would you clarify the boundaries of the qualifications you speak of?" questioned Lindong as he stared at Jiang Hao and gave a faint smile. "The degree of respect and your strength," said Jiang Hao casually. "It has been only a short while since I entered the Desolate Hall, so it's plausible that most of the seniors here are not familiar with me. Thus, on the degree of respect, I truly do not have an edge. However, I can certainly tell everyone here that our Desolate Hall would not be ranked last in the next hall competition." Lindong's gentle and relaxed words resounded across the platform, causing quite a few disciples to gawk. These words were relatively rampant, as the strength of the Desolate Hall was greatly lacking compared to the other 3 halls in Dao Sect. Trying to move up the rankings was not a simple task. "On what basis do you dare to utter such arrogant words?" said Jiang Hao coldly. "Based on the fact that I endured under the Pill River for 11 days, said Lindong casually while giving a faint smile. Jiang Hao stagnated for a brief moment before flinging his sleeves and replied with cold laughter, "That does not mean anything. The current you only has a cultivation level of 5 Yuan Nirvana stage. Where is your courage coming from? If junior brother Lindong really has the ability to help our Desolate Hall break free from the last rank, it would not be a big issue to make an exception for your promotion," said a slightly famous disciple standing on the platform suddenly in a solemn voice. "Yes, if you can achieve what you have just said, there's no problem with granting you an exception." After the statement was made by the disciple, a few other direct disciples added in their opinions. Although Jiang Hao was cunning with his words, all of them knew the potential of being able to endure under the bottom of the Pill River for 11 days represented. If Lindong was truly able to achieve what he had said and elevate their Desolate Hall from the last rank, this would be an extremely prideful matter for all the Desolate Hall disciples. After all, for so many years, their Desolate Hall has always been mocked by the disciples of the 3 other halls. That feeling was truly unpleasant. HMPH. After witnessing the sudden change, Jiang Hao felt somewhat angry and shouted, "You all can't be that naive, right? It doesn't matter how terrifying his talent is, how can a new disciple like him possibly compete with the top disciples who have comprehended the 3 other great mysterious scriptures? If he can't achieve it, does that mean that senior brother Jiang Hao can?" A voice rang from the platform refuted. Jiang Hao's facial expression turned somewhat ugly. The 3 great mysterious scriptures were extremely strong. If they were that easily to contend against, why would the Desolate Hall end up in such a pitiful state for so many years? "Senior brother Jiang Hao, I presume that the current level of respect should suffice, right?" asked Lindong with a smile. Jiang Hao took a deep breath and replied while flames of anger surged within his eyes, "Such eloquence. However, you can't thoroughly convince all the disciples here just based on that." "I understand." Lindong faintly nodded his head and instantly took a slight step forward. Stretching out his right hand towards Jiang Hao, a soft and relaxed voice rang across the platform, "Senior brother Jiang Hao, please guide me." Lindong was clearly aware that it did not matter what he said. Jiang Hao would never be willing to let this go, thus the only way to resolve it was very simple: fight. He has guts. On the other 3 areas of the platform, the 3 senior direct disciples Tong Pang, Fang Yun, and Song Ju all narrowed their eyes after seeing Lindong's reply. They secretly smiled in their hearts as they thought, did he really treat Jiang Hao as a kid? Although they had previously seen Lindong undergoing the 5th Nirvana stage tribulation, there was still an extremely large disparity when compared to Jiang Hao. Furthermore, the latter's combat prowess was not something an ordinary 7 Yuan Nirvana stage expert could compare with. Low murmuring voices could be heard spreading out from the platform. There were quite a few people that frowned. As disciples of the Desolate Hall, they were extremely clear on how powerful Jiang Hao really was. Although it had to be said that they had seen Lindong's frightening combat prowess, Jiang Hao was not a kid. He was one of the 4 senior direct disciples of the Desolate Hall. He is just like an adolescent bull which does not fear a tiger. The corners of Jiang Hao's mouth cracked open slightly and revealed a slight crescent that was either sneering or appreciation. Raising his head and looking towards Chen Zhen, he said, "Senior uncles, do you think I should accept this challenge? Please feel relaxed, I would show ample discretion. I am clearly aware of this junior brother's talent and would not let any serious injuries to befall him. However, since he is now in the desolate hall, he has to understand our rules. In the future, I believe he would understand the pained heart of being a senior brother like me." After hearing that, both Chen Zhen and Wu Dao had a wrinkle on their forehead. A brief hint of hesitation flashed past their eyes. Lindong directly challenging Jiang Hao had slightly exceeded their expectations, as they had presumed that Lindong would exercise forbearance. No matter what, the former was one of the 4 senior direct disciples. Being the hall masters of the desolate hall, they were very clear about the various successes of Jiang Hao. Since Lindong has taken the initiative and challenged you, you naturally have the right to accept it. However, it would not be held now, instead, it would be held 5 days later. Coincidentally, it is also the date of the monthly competition. At the appointed time, the both of you can fight to your heart's content. Chen Zhen contemplated silently for a moment, before finally flinging his hand and uttering those words solemnly. He understood that passing this obstruction created by Jiang Hao was essential to their plans to grant an exception for Lindong to become a senior direct disciple. However, Lindong, you have just entered the desolate hall and have yet to learn the desolate hall martial arts. After today, you can visit the desolate hall martial arts hall and observe and choose any martial arts in there. Lindong was faintly startled. It seems like Chen Zhen was not favoring his odds in a fight between him and Jiang Hao. Therefore, he bought him 5 days' time to learn the martial arts in Desolate Hall. "Ha ha, let's proceed with whatever Senior Uncle Chen Zhen has said." Jiang Hao gave a casual laugh as he obviously understood Chen Zhen's hidden intentions. Shooting a look at Lindong, he flung his sleeves before he said with a smile, "Junior brother Lindong, you have to make the best out of these 5 days. I am certainly not biased against you. If you had entered the desolate hall for at least half a year to a year, I would not even mention half a word. However, currently..." Speaking until this point, Jiang Hao shook his head and stopped speaking. However, the meaning behind his words was very clear. He did not believe the current Lindong had the qualifications to become a senior direct disciple of the desolate hall. Lindong faintly smiled without a tinge of fear. A gentle chuckle, that was meant to oppose him, slowly spread out. "Thank you, senior brother, Jiang Hao, for the reminder. Then let's meet again after 5 days." The commotion caused by the Pill River head immersion finally died down following the emergence of Lindong. Countless disciples around the Pill River also left with varying emotions. All of them clearly understood that it was likely that all the disciples within the Dao sect would know about this mysterious new disciple in Desolate Hall called Lindong, enduring for 11 days under the Pill River. This frightening result was sufficient to surpass every younger generation member in Dao sect. After the crowd scattered and everyone began to leave, another piece of information caused many people to be stunned as well. Lindong had issued a challenge to one of the 4 senior direct disciples of the Desolate Hall, Jiang Hao. Quite a number of people involuntarily parted their mouths when they heard the news. Although they understood that Lindong had no other choice, they still involuntarily sighed within their hearts. This new disciple called Lindong was really unwilling to be left alone. Such rare deeds had been done by him one after another. The Dao sect was not lacking in talent. However, there was seldom anyone who issued a challenge to the whole senior direct disciple after having just joined for less than a month. This was because everyone knew the enormous gap that existed between them. All the disciples clearly understood Jiang Hao's strength. 7 Yuan Nirvana stage is quite an outstanding existence in all 4 halls. Yet, Lindong was only at 5 Yuan Nirvana stage, despite having successfully endured the Nirvana tribulation earlier. Although everyone was clearly aware of the gap between the two, they did not say mock Lindong and call him an arrogant fool. The result that Lindong had displayed earlier was sufficient to get all the disciples within Dao sect to withdraw their underestimation. No one was certain if this new person, who had performed a miracle, would be able to continue performing such miracles. There will be a good show 5 days later. The various disciples thought in this manner after facing each other. An anticipation surged within their hearts. They wanted to see if Lindong would once again display such a shocking performance when faced with an old senior direct disciple like Jiang Hao. Additionally, everyone clearly understood that if Lindong really ended up fighting on par with Jiang Hao, he would become the fastest person in the history of Dao sect to become a senior direct disciple. Everyone felt envious within their hearts when they thought of this. At the same time, they also started to look forward to the match 5 days later. The next day. Creak. Lindong pushed open the door and exited. Sunlight scattered down from the sky and shone onto his body, filling him with a warm and comfortable sensation. Both his eyes narrowed slightly before he opened them. The corner of his mouth involuntarily lifted into an arc when he saw this paradise-like place being shrouded by fog. It was really a decent place. Since Lindong was a direct disciple, the place where he stayed at was much quieter than Mo Ling and the rest. Moreover, according to the rules of the Desolate Hall, everyone who was not a direct disciple would have to gather on the Pill River platform and undergo compulsory training. Hence, this mountaintop was quite quiet. Have you rested well? A familiar laughter was suddenly transmitted over while Lindong was enjoying this quiet moment. Lindong turned his head only to see Wu Dao standing a short distance away while smilingly staring at him. Lindong smiled. After which, he cupped his hands together and bowed at Wu Dao. You little fellow. This time around, the surprise you have given me is quite great. 11 days. This result. It is even better than Senior Ju Tong back then. Wu Dao slowly walked towards him. His eyes paused on Lindong's youthful face before he softly sighed. There was a complicated emotion in his tone. Ju Tong. Lindong blinked his eyes slightly. Currently, he was also aware that this Senior Ju Tong was the one who had successfully comprehended the Great Desolated Scripture. Moreover, he was an extremely fearsome person who even charged up to Yuan Gate alone and killed 3 of their great elders. However, you should not be celebrating yet. I am aware that you are hiding many secrets. This time around, it is likely that you used some tactics at the bottom of the Pill River. However, Senior Ju Tong back then solely relied on his own strength. Wu Dao said. At times, having many tactics is also an ability. Lindong shrugged his shoulders. He was always a practical person. As long as it is useful, who cares what it is? After all, there is no absolute fairness in this world. Moreover, these tactics would not appear without reason. In order to obtain them, Lindong had to expend great effort and pay a great price for them. Of course, even though Lindong put it this way, he still involuntarily had a heartfelt respect for that Senior Ju Tong. The latter was indeed worthy of being a character who dared to charge up to Yuan Gate alone. Little fellow, you are really cunning. Wu Dao laughed. He did not refute Lindong's words. After musing for a moment, he said, Your act of challenging Jiang Hao this time around is a little reckless. Jiang Hao's strength is not something that Tong Chuan can compare with. I want to study the Great Desolated Scripture. It is unavoidable to face objections from the 4 seniors. Lindong helplessly laughed. With your talent, as long as you train for another half a year within the Desolate Hall, there would definitely be no one who will oppose your promotion to Senior Direct Disciple. Wu Dao uttered those words before immediately shaking his head and said, It is pointless to say anything now. You are also not a reckless person. Since you dare to utter those words, it is likely that you must be confident in your chances. Let's go. I will take you to the Desolate Hall Martial Arts Hall. Since you are a disciple of the Desolate Hall, you will ultimately need to familiarize yourself with the Desolate Hall's martial arts. Wu Dao did not delay any further after uttering those words. His body moved and he stepped into the distance. Lindong hurriedly followed when he saw this. The Desolate Hall was extremely spacious. Over a dozen large peaks directly touched the clouds. The fog lingered over the place, giving it the appearance of a paradise. There was some vague training sound being emitted from those mountaintops. A flourishing aura spread over the entire sky. Under Wu Dao's lead, the two of them flew for around 10+ minutes before they finally landed on a large mountaintop near the middle of the desolate hall. One could see a huge ancient stone tower on the top of this mountain. Green rocks covered the surroundings of the stone tower. A stone path that was formed by stone fragments extended out and led over the whole mountaintop. There were quite a number of desolate hall disciples coming and going at this place. When these disciples saw Wu Dao, all of them hurriedly bowed and greeted him. Immediately, numerous strange eyes looked towards Lindong. Currently, the latter was also quite a famous person within the desolate hall. Wu Dao nodded slightly towards those disciples. After which, his eyes did not look around as he led Lindong and directly headed for that ancient stone tower. When they got nearer, Lindong was finally able to sense just how enormous the stone tower in front of his eyes was. Although time had left behind some mottled traces, it also gave the tower an increasingly dense vicissitude aura. This vicissitude aura represented the foundation and inheritance of a sect. Lindong looked at the stone tower in front of him before a fiery heat flashed across his eyes. He was clearly extremely curious about this super sect's martial arts. Lindong's eyes shifted down from the stone tower. After which, he looked towards the stone door before his eyes immediately narrowed. There was a grey-robed old man at the stone door carrying a broom in his hand and gently sweeping the leaves on the ground. The elderly man's face was extremely old and his wrinkles were just like gullies. Both his eyes also revealed a grey-white color and it seemed like he did not have any pupils. At a glance, he was actually a blind person. However, it is this blind person that caused the mental energy within Lindong's Niwen Palace to faintly tremble. This situation was something that Lindong had encountered for the first time in many years. The thing that most surprised Lindong the most was that he was unable to sense even the slightest yuan power ripple from this blind old man. Wu Dao had clearly noticed Lindong's eyes. However, he did not say anything. He walked forward and bowed his body slightly towards that blind old man. However, the latter did not respond. In fact, he continued to sweep the withered leaves. I will bring you to this spot. The number of martial arts within the martial arts hall is just like an ocean. What you choose will depend on your own luck. I am also unable to provide you with much guidance. Wu Dao was not surprised by that blind old man's reaction. He subsequently turned his head and spoke to Lindong. But no matter which martial arts you learn, you must remember not to abandon the essence of our desolate hall. Wu Dao placed his hands behind him and said. Lindong was slightly startled. He mused for a moment before softly asking, "Desolate force?" Lindong had sensed this unique force when he was fighting with Tong Chuan. If it was not because he possessed the devouring ancestral symbol, he would definitely be at a great disadvantage due to that energy. Wu Dao was clearly extremely satisfied by Lindong's reaction. He nodded slightly and said, "There is a desolate stone within the martial arts hall. All the desolate hall's disciples obtain desolate force from there. That energy would strengthen the power of your martial arts." Understood. Lindong nodded. He was also extremely interested in that so-called desolate force. Go in. Wu Dao waved his hand. Lindong ceased hesitating upon hearing this. He bowed slightly towards Wu Dao and strode forward. He hesitated for a moment when he passed by the blind old man along the way. After which, he also bowed towards the latter before entering the stone tower. Wu Dao looked at Lindong's gradually disappearing figure and softly exhaled. His eyes looked towards that blind old man before he softly said, "He is that little fellow who was even more outstanding than Senior Jutong in the Pill River head immersion." Kai? The blind old man, who did not once cease sweeping the ground, finally paused at this moment. Back then, Senior Jutong merely sat for 3 days in front of the desolate stone to obtain the desolate force. I wonder what Lindong can do. He is perhaps the disciple with the greatest odds of comprehending the great desolated scripture in 100 years. If Senior is interested, you can pay more attention to him. Wu Dao looked at the blind old man and softly said. The old man was quiet for a moment and he did not speak. All he did was slowly keep his broom before he slowly walked into the stone tower. Wu Dao quietly sighed in relief when he saw this. From his demeanor, It seems like he was quite interested in Lindong. Little fellow, obtaining the desolate force is the first step in comprehending the great desolated scripture. If you are unable to even take this step, it is likely that you are not affiliated with the great desolate scripture. Wu Dao raised his head, looked into the tower and softly muttered. This video will end here.